What if the deadliest warriors in the galaxy weren't armed with the best weapon, but with nothing to lose and a fire in their hearts that refused to die? When an alien general lands on Earth expecting an easy victory, he instead finds a lesson in fear, resilience, and the unstoppable will of humanity. This isn't just war, it's survival against the impossible. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show your support with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's jump into the story. The wind whispered gently through the towering trees, stirring the smoky trails from the bonfire into the night air. Flames crackled in the center of a rough circle made from old tree trunks, where young alien cadets sat, their armor scratched from training drills but still shining with the colors of their home planets. The sky above them was filled with stars, countless and cold, stretching across the heavens like spilled light. These cadets had come from different worlds, each with different customs and beliefs, yet tonight they shared a common feeling: excitement. They were ready to be soldiers. Or so they thought. A sudden hush fell over the group as footsteps echoed from the shadows beyond the firelight. The sound was steady, deliberate, and somehow heavy. Out of the darkness stepped a tall, lean figure. His skin was a deep grayish bronze, etched with lines and scars that told a lifetime of brutal stories. His long coat, once military standard, was now worn and faded. A wide belt carried strange tools and an old weapon, not for decoration, but clearly still ready for use. His name was General Sarek. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing tired eyes that had seen too much. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The younger cadets sat straighter. Everyone had heard of Sarek. Some of the stories made him a hero, others a ghost who walked away from every war he fought, while others didn't walk at all. No one dared speak until a younger cadet with smooth copper-colored scales finally broke the silence. "Is it true?" he asked, voice soft. "Did you really face the humans?" Sarek turned his eyes toward the cadet. The fire danced in his pupils, but his face remained still. Then he spoke, his voice like gravel dragged across metal. "Faced them? Yes. Survived them. Barely." A murmur rippled through the circle. Some laughed nervously, thinking it a joke. But Sarek didn't laugh. He stepped closer to the fire, lowered himself onto a log, and set his hands on his knees. "You want stories of glory, victory, heroes." He paused. "But you came to the wrong fire." The wind shifted as if the trees themselves leaned in to listen. "You've been told Earth is just a primitive world, a weak place, a planet to conquer. That's a lie." Sarek's voice was calm, but every word struck like a blow. Earth is not weak. It is dangerous. Not because of its weapons or machines, but because of the ones who live there. The cadets watched him in silence. Their usual confidence was slowly being replaced by curiosity. Sarek was not trying to scare them, not exactly. He was telling them the truth. "Let me tell you something about that world. On Earth, the ground can open up and swallow you. The skies turn to fire. The oceans hide monsters with teeth like steel. Even the plants defend themselves. But worse than all of that are the humans." One cadet raised a brow. "But they're not advanced, right? They don't even have proper starflight." Sarek looked at him, his stare sharp. "No, they don't, but they have something else. Something we underestimated." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The fire crackled louder. "We thought they'd surrender. We thought we were gods and they were ants. What we found was something terrifying. We found creatures who do not fear pain, who don't stop fighting, even when they know they're going to die, who will use rocks, sticks, even their own bodies as weapons if that's all they have left." The fire popped, sending a spray of sparks into the night air. The cadets watched them rise and vanish like tiny souls. "We brought plasma cannons. They brought traps made from trees and bones. We had shields. They had willpower. We had numbers. They had courage." Another cadet, one with golden eyes and sharp horns, scoffed, "Surely technology gives us the edge." Sarek's lips pulled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You'll learn that it doesn't matter what's in your hand when your enemy has already decided they're willing to lose everything, including their life, especially their life." The cadets shifted, the mood around the fire growing heavier. These weren't the stories they expected. There were no glorious marches or grand speeches of victory. Only fear, respect, and something else. A strange sense of awe. Sarek picked up a small stick and held it over the flame, watching it blacken. We lost soldiers on Earth who never even saw the ones who killed them. We couldn't adapt fast enough. They made their world fight for them. The ground we walked on betrayed us. The trees listened to them. Or maybe they just knew how to listen better than we did. He threw the burned stick into the fire, and it hissed as it cracked. We thought they were animals. But they were more than that. They were survivors. No one spoke. The fire was the only sound now, steady and soft. Finally, Sarek stood, casting a long shadow across the circle. "When the day comes that you face a human, remember this," he said, his voice quiet but full of weight. "Don't look at their weapons. Look into their eyes. That's where the real danger lives." And with that, he turned and stepped back into the dark, his figure swallowed by the trees, leaving behind only the fire and the silence he'd wrapped around their hearts. The jungle was the first enemy they met, and it welcomed them with open arms and hidden teeth. General Sarek had led his battalion down to Earth with full confidence. They had landed in the thick green heart of the planet-dense jungle stretching in all directions, buzzing with life and heat. The mission had seemed simple: locate a human outpost, crush any resistance, and prepare the area for resource extraction. But from the moment their boots touched the muddy earth, something felt wrong. The air was heavy and wet, clinging to their skin and armor. The heat pressed down like an invisible hand, draining strength with every step. Their equipment began to suffer almost immediately. Communications grew static-filled. Scanners flickered and died, and drones crashed into trees or vanished altogether. It was as if the jungle itself was rejecting them. What had looked like just another battlefield from space became a maze of vines, roots, and shadows the moment they were inside it. Sarek's second in command, a soldier named Varn, had been the first to express concern. "This place isn't natural," he had said, wiping sweat from his brow. "It watches us." Sarek dismissed the comment at first, assuming it was just nerves. But by the second day, he began to feel it too. The rustling leaves that never seemed to settle, the movement just at the edge of vision, the silence that would suddenly drop like a weight, thick and warning. Even the animals stayed hidden. The jungle wasn't alive, it was aware. Then the first shot came. A sharp crack echoed through the trees, followed by the thud of a soldier dropping to the forest floor. The squad froze. There had been no sign of an attacker, no warning. Just death from the shadows. They scrambled for cover, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. Nothing. No heat signatures, no movement. The enemy was invisible. That night, the squad barely slept. The jungle came alive after dark. Strange calls echoed through the trees, and glowing eyes flashed in the distance. Every crunch of a leaf or snap of a branch put the soldiers on edge. They set up extra perimeter sensors, but many failed without explanation. Others showed movement, but no one was there when they went to check. Over the next few days, more soldiers went missing. Some vanished during patrols. Others were found, dragged into the trees, their armor torn, their bodies lifeless. No one ever saw the humans directly, but it became clear they were being hunted. Not in open battle, but from the shadows, patiently, smartly. They used the jungle the way a blade uses a handle, with skill, precision, and deadly purpose. One soldier named Kessa, a specialist in field medicine, began collecting stories from the survivors. "They blend into the forest," she whispered one night by the fire. "They don't fight like we do. They become the jungle." "They are everywhere and nowhere." Sarek listened in silence. He had seen it too, tracks that led nowhere. Traps, made from roots and vines that sprung from the ground. They had lost 5 soldiers to a single pit covered in leaves. Another squad had triggered an avalanche of boulders that crushed their transport. These weren't wild accidents. These were planned. In one patrol, Sarek had led a group deeper into the jungle, hoping to find the human base. What he found instead was a massacre. A dozen alien soldiers lay scattered across a small clearing, their weapons gone, their armor shredded. Blood soaked into the soil. Nearby, human markings on the trees revealed messages left behind, warnings, threats, promises. They weren't afraid. They were proud. After that, paranoia set in. Soldiers jumped at shadows. Some refused to go out on missions. Others began to whisper of curses, of spirits in the forest. One even claimed he saw a human hanging upside down in a tree, waiting, watching, then vanishing like smoke. Sarek knew better. These weren't spirits. These were people fighting for their home, for their lives. And they were winning. By the end of the week, morale had dropped to dangerous levels. Supplies were running low. Wounds were harder to treat in the heat and dirt. Disease started to creep in, strange bites and fevers, unfamiliar sicknesses that drained even the strongest among them. The jungle was slowly killing them, one way or another. Sarek met with his remaining officers, their eyes hollow and tired. "We underestimated them," he admitted. "This isn't a war zone. It's a trap, and we walked straight into it." One officer, a young scout named Ekin, spoke quietly. "General, the humans, they don't just know the land. They are the land. We can't outfight them here." Sarek didn't answer right away. He looked into the fire, the light dancing in his dark eyes. For the first time in his long career, he felt something unfamiliar creeping into his bones, not fear, but respect. The kind that only comes when one predator realizes another might be stronger. The jungle had taught them a lesson, one carved in sweat, blood, and silence. Earth was not a soft target. It was a living battlefield. And its defenders were far more dangerous than anyone had warned them. As night fell again, and the jungle began to hum with its strange, rhythmic breath, Sarek sat alone for a long time. He no longer believed they could win with force alone. The war was no longer about weapons or technology. It had become something far older, about survival. And in that, the humans were masters. The rain fell in slow, heavy drops, soaking the leaves and the ground, turning the trails into rivers of mud. The alien soldiers stood at the edge of a hill, staring down at a small human village below. It was barely a dozen buildings, wood, metal scraps, and a few sat-like dishes tucked into a valley between thick jungles. It didn't look like much. From the ridge, General Sarek's battalion had a clear view of everything. They had the high ground. They had numbers. They had weapons the humans couldn't even begin to understand. But none of that gave Sarek comfort. He stood beside his officer, Ekin, watching the flickering lights from the village windows. "We should have leveled it already," Ekin said. "It's just a collection of farmers and mechanics. No military presence." Sarek shook his head. "That's what we thought last time." The memories of ambushes, traps, and unseen attackers were still fresh in his mind. Every time they assumed the humans would give up, they were met with resistance that defied logic. Still, this village needed to be taken. Command was waiting for a victory, something to justify the campaign. At dawn, the attack began. The battalion moved in silently, spreading through the trees. Their goal was quick and clean: surround, threaten, and force surrender. The first part went well. No alarms, no resistance. As they encircled the village, they sent a broadcast message. "Surrender. No one needs to die. We don't want to destroy you. Just give up." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a door opened. A single human stepped into the open square. It was a woman, thin and injured, her arm in a makeshift sling. Her clothes were torn and stained, but she walked with steady steps. In her other hand, she carried a long tube something. Old and clunky. It took Sarek a moment to realize it was a missile launcher, pieced together from scavenged parts. She raised it without hesitation and fired. The missile struck one of the alien tanks on the ridge. The explosion lit the valley in orange and red, fire roaring into the sky. Sarek watched in disbelief as the woman was thrown back by the blast. Her body hit the ground, rolled once, and then somehow, she got back up. Limping, bleeding, she raised a pistol with her good hand and fired into the chaos. It made no sense. She should have been dead. But she kept going. All around the village, the humans erupted into action. From windows, rooftops, behind fences, they appeared with weapons that were old, strange, and deadly. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were workers, farmers, even children. But every one of them fought with the rage and focus of people protecting their home. The aliens fired back, but the humans moved fast, using the buildings and terrain like they had trained for this. Their whole lives, Sarek shouted orders. Varn and 2 squads pushed toward the central barn where they believed supplies were stored. They never made it. Explosives hidden in barrels took them out in a sudden blast of fire and smoke. From the treetops, snipers picked off advancing soldiers. One by one, Sarek's troops fell. The jungle that had haunted them for days now watched again. But this time, the enemy was clearer. Human fighters slipped in and out of sight like ghosts. A young alien soldier named Rallan ran toward the center to take cover but was hit by a homemade spike trap. Another tried to fire a drone, but was struck by a bullet before the device even launched. Sarek saw it all from the edge of the village. The humans weren't organized in the traditional sense. They had no command ranks or visible strategies. But they fought like a single living body, each person knowing their role, each one determined not to give an inch. It wasn't madness, it was purpose. Pure, unshakable purpose. Near the remains of a downed transport, Sarek found one of his wounded soldiers, Taija. She had taken a shot to the leg and was dragging herself toward cover. A human teenager approached cautiously, weapon raised. Sarek tensed, expecting another loss. But the boy didn't shoot. He lowered his weapon, looked at Taija, and then dropped a water canteen before disappearing again. Sarek froze. That one action spoke louder than any weapon. This wasn't just a war. It was something deeper. Something the aliens couldn't understand. A connection to the land, to each other. And even sometimes to mercy. By nightfall, the battalion had retreated to the trees, dragging their wounded, leaving behind scorched earth and broken machines. The village still stood. Smoke curled into the sky. Bodies, both alien and human, lay scattered between the houses. But the humans had held their ground. Again, Sarek stood alone at the edge of the ridge, staring down at the battlefield. His armor was scratched and dented, his voice quiet as he whispered to no one. They didn't run. They didn't surrender. Even when they should have. The fire of the burning tank still glowed in the valley below, but all Sarek could see was the face of the woman who fired the first shot. He didn't know her name, but he would never forget her eyes. Not full of hate but of fierce, fearless defiance. And he realized something, cold and clear. They hadn't lost because the humans had better weapons. They had lost because the humans had something no weapon could match. The will to fight, even when there was no chance to win. The fires of the village still smoldered when the last transport lifted off. General Sarek stood on the dark ridge, watching the jungle close in around the ruins of his failed mission. Rain had begun to fall again, soft at first, then heavier, washing blood from the soil and steam from the broken machines. His battalion had been reduced to a fraction of its strength. What had begun as a confident march to victory had ended in retreat and silence. Command had called him back, but Sarek didn't leave. Not yet. He stayed behind on Earth, not as a conqueror, but as a witness. Days turned into weeks. The jungle became less of a stranger and more of a teacher. He wandered its paths, not as a soldier in armor, but as a traveler with open eyes. He watched the animals move with purpose, the plants grow in silence, and the humans live. He had expected them to celebrate after the battle, to cheer their survival. But instead, the humans mourned. They gathered their dead, buried them with simple, quiet rituals, and moved on with heavy hearts. There were no parades, no songs. Just the quiet understanding that survival came at a cost, and life must continue anyway. That quiet strength struck Sarek harder than any bullet in time. He returned to the village, walking openly and without weapons. The humans saw him, but no one raised a gun. An older man with a limp nodded to him, as if to say, "We've seen enough war." A child offered him a piece of fruit. It was the first thing Sarek had eaten in days. He sat under the shade of a half-burnt tree, chewing slowly, unsure what to say or do. He didn't speak their language, but action spoke louder. He helped rebuild the broken walls, carried fresh water from the well, and sat beside the wounded with quiet respect. He listened to the sounds of human life, the laughter, the arguments, the moments of silence between work. They didn't treat him like a threat. They didn't treat him like a friend either. They simply let him be, and somehow, that was more powerful than anything else. Time passed. His old armor rusted in the corner of a hut. His communicator stopped blinking. No messages came from command. It was as if the galaxy had forgotten him, and in a way, he was grateful. Earth had changed him, not with force, but with truth. He had come to destroy, and instead, he had been rebuilt. One evening, years later, a campfire burned in a different forest, far from the jungle. Young cadets sat in a circle, their armor clean, their minds filled with stories of victory and alien pride. They waited for someone to speak, someone who could tell them what war was really like. Out of the trees stepped an old figure, his coat patched, his eyes deep with memory. It was Sarek. He moved slowly, each step careful, each movement calm. The cadets straightened, just as others had long ago. They expected stories of glory, tales of great battles. Instead, he gave them truth. He told them about the jungle that swallowed machines, about the village that stood against fire, about the humans who fought not for medals, but for each other. He spoke of loss and survival, of courage that didn't roar, but whispered, "Not today." The cadets listened, silent and wide-eyed. His words didn't spark pride. They sparked understanding. Then one cadet, a quiet one with ash-gray skin and dark green eyes, spoke. "Did you ever see them again?" she asked. Sarek looked at her for a long time. "Yes," he said. "I lived among them. I learned from them. They taught me more about strength than all my training ever did." The cadet hesitated. But were they really the enemy? Sarek let the question hang in the air. The fire crackled. A bird called in the distance. "No," he said finally. "They were the mirror. We looked at them and saw what we had lost, and they looked at us and showed us what we could still become." The cadets fell silent again, but not out of fear, out of thought, out of something deeper. They had come expecting a lesson in battle tactics. What they got was a lesson in humility. And then, from the back of the group, another voice spoke. It belonged to a cadet who had said nothing all night. He looked different from the others, slightly shorter, sharper eyes, and a quietness that felt heavy. "My mother," he said, "was born on Earth." All eyes turned to him. She came here after the war. She never spoke much about it. Only that she loved the stars, but never forgot the trees. Sarek met his gaze. In that moment, Nothing needed to be said. The future had already begun. The line between enemy and friend, human and alien, had blurred, then faded. Sarek stood once. "More, remember this," he said, his voice soft but steady. "You'll face many enemies, but not all of them are strangers. And not all of them need to be defeated." With that, he stepped into the shadows again, not a ghost, not a warrior, just a man who had walked through fire and come out changed. And the fire behind him burned on not as a warning, but as a light,